The concrete dust coating the inside of my mouth was gritty, like powdered regret. My head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that had been my constant companion for the last 12 hours. Trapped, that's what I was. Trapped between a crumpled bus and a fallen billboard, the metal screeching with every shift of my weight. My phone was gone, probably crushed somewhere in the wreckage of what used to be a bustling intersection. The air outside, even filtered through the fractured windshield, was thick with the coppery tang of fresh blood, and something else, something acrid and metallic that burned my nostrils. I remembered the impact, the sudden swerve of the bus driver, his face a mask of bewildered terror as a woman stumbled into the street, not looking at anything, just moving with a grotesque, unnatural gait. Her jaw was slack, her eyes glazed over. But it wasn't the vacant stare of a drunk. This was something else, something fundamentally broken. Then the screams started. Not just one, but a chorus, rising from the sidewalk, from the cafes, from the open doors of shops. People running, falling, and then the biting. My vision swam. A piece of rebar had skewered at the side of my chest, not deep, but enough to make breathing a shallow, painful exercise. Every gasp was a sharp knife twisting inside. I had to get out, had to move. But the crumpled dashboard was pinning my legs, a heavy, unyielding weight. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. Not in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. The world didn't just unravel. Outside, the sounds were shifting. The initial chaos of screams and crashes had given way to something far more terrifying, a low, guttural moaning. A chorus of it, rising and falling, punctuated by the wet tearing of flesh. My stomach heaved, but there was nothing left to throw up. I had to focus, had to get free. I strained against the dashboard, my muscles screaming in protest. The rebar pulled, sending a fresh wave of pain through my chest. My shirt was already soaked, clinging to me like a second skin of fear. Through the broken window, I saw one of them. A man in a business suit, his tie askew, his expensive jacket ripped. He was bent over something on the pavement, his back a grotesque silhouette against the setting sun. He wasn't moving. Not exactly. His shoulders twitched, a slow, sickening rhythm. Then he lifted his head. His face was a ruined mask. Half of it was gone, a bloody hollow where an eye should have been. His mouth was stretched wide, showing teeth stained crimson. And those eyes, they were empty, utterly devoid of life, yet filled with an insatiable hunger. He made a sound then, a wet, rattling gasp that echoed the moaning coming from all around. It was a sound that made every cell in my body recoil. He was one of them, a mutated host. The phrase stuck in my mind, a cold, clinical label for the abomination I was witnessing. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. That was it. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't a disease that could be cured. This wasn't a riot that could be quelled. This was the end. A new surge of adrenaline, cold and pure, ripped through me. I didn't want to die here, pinned like an insect. I wouldn't. I gritted my teeth, ignoring the pain, and twisted. The rebar tore, sending a fresh gush of warmth down my side, but I didn't care. Anything to get free. The dashboard shifted a fraction, just enough. I pulled my right leg, then my left, scraping skin, tearing muscle, but they came free. My legs, numb and tingling, collapsed beneath me. I was out from under the dashboard, but now I was a crumpled mess on the bus floor, breathing in the metallic dust and the smell of my own fear. The bus was tilted at a precarious angle, leaning against the billboard. Through the mangled front door, I could see shadows moving. The moaning was closer now. They knew I was here. They could probably smell the blood, fresh and potent. I needed a weapon, anything. My eyes scanned the interior. Shattered glass, twisted metal, abandoned bags. Nothing. My gaze fell on the emergency hammer by the back door. Small, red, designed to shatter glass. Not much, but it was something. Getting to it meant crossing the length of the bus, past the driver's seat, past the gaping hole where the windshield used to be, where the shadows danced. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. Every breath was a shallow gasp, my chest burning. I pushed myself up, using the seat backs for support. My legs wobbled like newborn fawns. The rebar wound was still bleeding, staining my shirt a deeper crimson. I pressed my palm against it, a futile attempt to staunch the flow. Each step was agony, a test of will. The bus groaned around me, a symphony of tortured metal. As I neared the front, a shadow fell across the opening. A face, grotesque and contorted, peered through the shattered windshield. It was the bus driver, or what was left of him. His uniform was ripped, his skin mottled, and his eyes, oh God, his eyes were milky white, completely devoid of color. A low growl rumbled in his throat. He tried to squeeze through the opening, his hands reaching, fingers grasping. I froze, my blood turning to ice. My breath hitched. He was so close, too close. I could smell the sickly sweet decay radiating from him, even through the acrid scent of the street. His mouth opened wider, a silent scream of hunger. I could see the torn flesh on his jaw, the exposed bone. He was completely, irrevocably changed. Another mutated host. I stumbled backward, away from the monstrosity, my eyes fixed on the emergency hammer. It felt like miles away. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. This was it. Fight or die. The thought, cold and clear, cut through the fog of pain and fear. I wasn't ready to die, not yet. He'd clawed his way further into the bus, his body twisting, contorting to fit through the narrow opening. His uniform snagged on a shard of glass, ripping with a sound like canvas tearing. He didn't flinch, just kept coming. His single-minded focus was terrifying. He wanted me, wanted to consume me. I made a break for it, stumbling past the rows of seats, my injured side screaming in protest. The bus swayed precariously, threatening to pitch me off my feet. I clutched a seat back, dragging myself forward, my eyes glued to the red hammer. "No!" I gasped, a raw, desperate sound. The bus driver, now fully inside, dropped to the floor with a wet thud. He pushed himself up, his movements jerky and disjointed, but fast, faster than I thought possible for something so broken. He was coming. My hand closed around the hammer. The plastic was smooth, cool against my clammy skin. Not much, but it was something. I turned, adrenaline surging, ready to face him. But he wasn't alone. Another one, a woman in a tattered dress, had managed to climb through the front opening and was now crawling into the bus, her limbs moving like a broken marionette. Two of them, and I was trapped. I backed up to the emergency exit at the rear of the bus. It was a small window, clearly marked, my only way out. But between me and it were the two mutated hosts, their moaning growing louder, their hunger palpable. This was an impossible choice. Fight them with a tiny hammer or try to escape through a window that might be too small. What would you have done? I still don't know if I made the right choice in that moment. I swung the hammer. It felt ridiculously light, flimsy. The bus driver was closer, his hands outstretched. I aimed for his head, putting all my meager strength into the blow. The hammer connected with a sickening crunch against his temple. He staggered, a guttural growl erupting from his throat, but he didn't fall, didn't even seem to be slowed. Just shook his head once, like a dog dislodging water, and lunged. My eyes widened in terror. This wasn't like the movies. They didn't just drop, they kept coming. His hand clamped around my arm, fingers like iron, surprisingly strong. His touch was cold, clammy. I could feel the grit of dried blood on his palm. He pulled me toward him, his face inches from mine, that awful gaping mouth. The woman in the tattered dress was closing in from my other side. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, to paralyze me. But then, a flash of memory. EMT training from a lifetime ago. Control the bleed, protect the airway, focus. My hand, still clutching the hammer, was free. I jammed it upward, into the exposed flesh of his throat, just below the jaw. The hammer disappeared. He made a choking sound, a wet, violent gurgle. His grip loosened, just a fraction. It was enough. I tore free, pulling the hammer out. Black fluid, thick and viscous, coated the tool. He staggered, clawing at his throat, still trying to reach me, but his movements were slowing, his focus wavering. The woman in the tattered dress was on me, her fingers digging into my shoulders. I pivoted, swinging the hammer in a desperate arc. It slammed into her jaw, dislocating it with a horrific snap. Her head lolled, but her grip remained. Her mouth, now hanging open at an impossible angle, still tried to bite. These were not just infected. These were something else. These were resilient. These were persistent. These were the mutated hosts. And they truly did make Extinction feel unstoppable. The emergency exit. I had to get to it. The bus driver was still stumbling, his gurgling growing weaker. But the woman was still on me, her weight dragging me down. I brought the hammer down on her head again and again, not stopping until her grip finally slackened, until her body went limp, collapsing at my feet. I didn't wait to see if she was truly dead. I couldn't. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely grasp the emergency latch. I pulled it. Nothing. Pushed it. Nothing. The mechanism was jammed. Twisted metal, probably. Despair, cold and heavy, settled in my gut. I was trapped. Again. Through the rear window, I saw more of them. Shuffling, lurching, drawn by the sounds of the struggle. A whole horde. They were converging on the bus. A silent, relentless tide of the dead. This was it. No, I wouldn't accept it. Not yet. I slammed the hammer against the emergency window, putting every last ounce of strength into the blow. The glass cracked, a spider web of lines radiating from the impact point. But it didn't shatter. Not fully. I hit it again and again, sweat pouring down my face, my side throbbing. The glass finally gave way, collapsing inward with a muffled crash. The opening was small, too small. I'd have to squeeze. My injured side screamed in protest, but I didn't care. I shoved myself through, first my head, then my shoulders, feeling the rough edges of the broken glass scrape against my skin. It was tight, agonizingly tight. I could feel the rebar wound tearing open again, a fresh wave of pain making my vision blur. But I had to keep going, had to get out. My legs finally cleared the window, and I dropped to the ground with a soft thud. I landed hard on my left shoulder, sending a shock wave of pain through my body. The alley was dark, mercifully empty, but I could hear them, still coming. The moaning was a wall of sound. I pushed myself up, my body screaming in protest, and stumbled down the alley, away from the bus, away from the intersection, away from the nightmare. My clothes were torn, bloodied, my chest ached, but I was alive, for now. The taste of dust and blood filled my mouth. The scent of decay was everywhere. The world had gone mad, and I was just trying to outrun it. But when the hosts mutated, Extinction became unstoppable. The feeling of that truth was a suffocating blanket draped over everything. I emerged from the alley onto a quieter residential street. The streetlights were still on, casting an eerie, flickering glow on the abandoned cars and deserted houses. Not a single living soul in sight, only shadows that seemed to writhe and sway in the periphery of my vision. Every creak of a loose shutter, every gust of wind rustling through unseen leaves made me jump. My heart refused to slow its frantic rhythm. My side was a mess. The torn fabric of my shirt stuck to the wound, and I could feel the warm, sticky flow of blood. I ripped a strip from my remaining sleeve, knotting it tightly around my chest to apply pressure. It wouldn't stop the bleeding entirely, but it might slow it down. The pain was a constant companion, a dull fire in my ribs, radiating outwards. I needed to find shelter, somewhere safe, somewhere to lick my wounds and figure out what the hell had just happened. My apartment, it was only a few blocks away, a place of familiarity, of comfort, of safety. Or so I hoped. Was anything truly safe anymore? As I walked, the silence of the residential street was punctuated by distant screams, gunshots, and that low, pervasive moaning, the soundtrack of the apocalypse. Each sound was a new spike of fear, making me quicken my pace, my limp becoming more pronounced. The air grew colder as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry orange. A child's bicycle lay overturned on a lawn, its front wheel still slowly spinning. A garden hose snaked across a driveway, the water still running, overflowing a brightly colored bucket. Mundane objects, remnants of a life that was now utterly, irrevocably gone. The contrast was jarring. How could such normalcy be so brutally ripped away in a single afternoon? How could the hosts mutate so quickly, so universally? I passed a park. The swing swayed gently in the breeze, creaking a mournful tune. On a bench, a family of 4 sat frozen. Not statues, just still. Their eyes were vacant, mouths agape. No injuries visible. They hadn't been bitten. They were just gone. Dead. But why? This wasn't just about bites. There was something else at play here, something more insidious. The implications chilled me to my core. I remembered the emergency broadcasts, fleeting fragments of a voice advising shelter in place, mentioning a highly virulent contagion. But they never said anything about this, about the reanimation, about the hunger, about the total collapse. It felt like the world had simply decided to end, and everyone was caught unawares, unprepared for this swift, unstoppable extinction. My apartment building loomed ahead, a 6-story brick structure, familiar and imposing, a fortress or a tomb. I pressed myself against the wall of the building next door, trying to control my ragged breathing. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it vibrate through my bones. Caution, always caution. They were attracted to sound, to movement. The main entrance was ajar, a dark maw gaping open. Not a good sign. Someone had either fled in a hurry or something had gotten in, or both. My hand tightened around the hammer. It was still sticky with black fluid, but I barely registered it. This was my weapon, my only weapon. I slipped inside, trying to be as quiet as possible. The lobby was dim, lit only by the emergency lights, casting long, dancing shadows. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of fear, and something else, something that reminded me of stagnant water and old meat. It was the smell of Nim. The elevator doors were wide open, the car stuck on the ground floor. A single pair of shoes lay abandoned on the faded carpet, a child's bright red sneakers. My throat tightened. I forced myself to move, my gaze sweeping the lobby. The concierge desk was empty, chair overturned, papers scattered across the floor. A half-eaten sandwich lay molding on a plate. Time was warping. How long had it been since these things happened? Hours? Days? A low moan echoed from the stairwell. My breath hitched. I froze, pressing myself against the wall, hammer raised. Footsteps, slow, shuffling, coming down. They were inside. My apartment wasn't safe. Nowhere was safe. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. The words were a mantra of despair in my mind. I couldn't risk the stairwell. That left the elevator. But it was dead. I looked at the maintenance panel beside the doors. Maybe, just maybe. I wasn't an engineer, but I knew a little about basic electrical systems. A long shot, a desperate gamble. But what other choice did I have? The moaning grew louder, the shuffling footsteps closer. They were definitely coming down. At least one, maybe more. I had to be quick. I fumbled with the panel cover, my fingers clumsy with fear and adrenaline. It was screwed shut. Of course. I looked at the hammer. It was designed to break glass, not pry open metal panels. But I had to try. I wedged the blunt end into a seam, twisted. It scraped, screeched, but the metal held. The sounds from the stairwell were at the bottom now. A shadow stretched into the lobby. I could hear their ragged breathing. No time. I hit the panel with the hammer, not gently, but with a desperate, furious strength. Again and again. The metal groaned. A small dent formed. I hit it repeatedly, each blow punctuated by a grunt of effort, my chest wound screaming in protest. The noise would attract them. I knew it. But I had no other option. The panel cover finally buckled, tearing away from the wall with a final protesting shriek of metal. Wires spilled out, a tangled spaghetti of color. Live wires? Dead wires? I had no idea. A figure emerged from the stairwell, a woman in a bathrobe, her hair a wild tangle, her face an expressionless mask of hunger. Her eyes found me, and she started to lurch forward, making that wet, guttural moan. I didn't hesitate. I jammed my hand into the tangle of wires, ignoring the sharp sting of a cut on my finger. I needed to find the main power, the override, anything. My fingers brushed against a thick red cable. Main power. Always red. I ripped it, twisting, tearing. A shower of sparks erupted, making me jump back with a cry. The elevator lights flickered. The overhead lights in the lobby pulsed once, then died, plunging the entire area into near darkness. Only the emergency lights remained, casting long, distorted shadows. The woman in the bathrobe stopped, disoriented by the sudden darkness. Then, with a low rumble, the elevator doors began to slowly close. A miracle, or sheer dumb luck, I didn't care. I shoved myself into the closing gap, not even looking at the woman in the bathrobe. My injured side scraped against the metal, sending a jolt of pain. But I was in. Safe. For now. The doors hissed shut, sealing me inside the cramped, dark box. I leaned against the cold metal wall, breathing heavily, the hammer still clutched in my hand. The elevator cabin was completely dark now, the emergency lights having failed. I could hear the faint, muffled sounds of their moaning from outside, but I was safe, locked away, I thought. Then, a low growl from the corner of the elevator. My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The growl was close, too close. I couldn't see anything in the oppressive darkness of the elevator. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed myself against the cold metal wall, trying to disappear into the shadows that weren't there. The hammer felt useless, a child's toy in my trembling grip. I could hear heavy, ragged breathing. The air was thick with that same sickly sweet decay.
My skin crawled. I knew what it was, what it had to be. Another one. Trapped in here with me. How? Had it been in here the whole time, a dark passenger, unnoticed? Or had it somehow slipped in as the doors closed? It didn't matter. What mattered was that I was a rat in a trap, and the trap was now shared. My eyes strained against the darkness, trying to discern any shape, any movement. Nothing. But the growling grew louder, a deep rumble that vibrated through the floor. It was moving, coming toward me. I clutched the hammer, my knuckles white. My wound throbbed, a dull, insistent ache. But the fear was far greater, sharpening my senses, pushing aside the pain. I held my breath, listening, waiting. Every muscle in my body was coiled tight, ready to spring, to fight, to do anything to survive. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. But I wasn't extinct yet, not while I could still draw breath. A scrape, a shuffle. It was right there. I could feel its heat, smell its putrid breath. My arms shot out, swinging the hammer wildly, desperately, hoping to connect. There was a sickening thud, a wet impact, and a sharp, pained snarl. I'd hit something. It lunged. I felt its weight slam into me, knocking the air from my lungs. I fell back against the elevator wall, the force of the impact rattling my teeth. Claws scraped against my face, tearing skin. I screamed, a choked, terrified sound. Its mouth was close, its teeth snapping. I could feel the wet spray of saliva against my cheek. I thrashed, kicking, punching, trying to dislodge it. The hammer had fallen from my grasp. I was unarmed, fighting blind against a creature of pure, unthinking hunger. Its weight was crushing, its strength incredible. I could feel its teeth trying to find purchase, scraping against my neck. This was it. This was how I died. In the dark, consumed by a monster in an elevator. No. A fierce, primal defiance surged through me. I would not die like this. I shoved upward with all my might, twisting, struggling. My knee connected with something solid, and it grunted, a deep, painful sound. It recoiled a fraction, just enough. My hand scrabbled on the floor, searching frantically for the hammer. My fingers brushed against something cold, metallic. The hammer! I grabbed it, adrenaline lending me impossible strength, and brought it down with all the fury of a cornered animal, again and again, slamming it into its head, its neck, anywhere I could hit. Each blow was a desperate prayer. The thing convulsed, a wet gurgle escaping its throat. Its grip on me loosened. I heard a sickening crack, felt bones splinter beneath the hammer. It stumbled backward, releasing me. I scrambled away, pressing myself into the farthest corner of the elevator, gasping for breath, my chest heaving.
The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the faint rhythmic creaking of the elevator cables. I waited, hammer raised, every nerve screaming. Was it dead? Was it playing dead? I couldn't tell. Minutes stretched into an eternity. My eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom, though it was still mostly absolute darkness. My heart rate began to slow, the adrenaline fading, leaving me weak and trembling. My face stung where its claws had raked me. I could feel the warm trickle of blood. The elevator wasn't moving. I was still trapped. But at least the immediate threat was gone. I hoped. I didn't dare move, didn't dare make a sound. I just sat there, huddled in the corner, listening to the silence, listening to the slow drip of blood from my own wounds. The floor indicator above the door flickered erratically, briefly illuminating the numbers. G, 1, 2, 3. My apartment was on the 4th floor. I needed power, real power, not just enough to close the doors. The emergency override must have been minimal. This was a waiting game, a game of pure, unadulterated fear. Outside, the world was ending. Inside, I was trapped in a metal box with a dead monster and my own demons. The thought of what was happening beyond these walls was almost as terrifying as what I had just faced. The sheer scale of the mutation, the speed, the complete, total lack of control. Extinction became unstoppable. The phrase echoed in my mind, a chilling pronouncement. I knew I couldn't stay here forever. The silence was unnerving, but the thought of what would happen if the power came back on, if the elevator started moving, if it opened on a floor filled with them, it was a fresh wave of terror. I needed a plan. My mind, despite the exhaustion and trauma, began to churn. I remembered the maintenance panel, the wires. There had to be a way to force the elevator to move, or to get out. The escape hatch on the roof. I'd seen it in movies. Did real elevators have those? I looked up, but the ceiling was too high, too dark to see anything. I started to feel around the edges of the elevator, my hands tracing the cold metal, searching for any seam, any weakness. My fingers brushed against a small, recessed panel near the top. Bingo! An emergency communication panel, and a small, square hatch just above it. Yes, escape hatch. But it was out of reach, too high to jump to. My legs were still weak from being pinned. My side was on fire. I needed something to stand on. The dead, mutated host. Its body was still warm. I shuddered at the thought, but necessity was a harsh mistress. I forced myself to grab its clothing, to drag it into position directly under the escape hatch. The weight was considerable, and the process was nauseating.
My stomach churned and I almost gagged on the smell, but I had to do it. Once it was positioned, I climbed onto its chest. The body shifted slightly, a soft, sickening give. I fought down another wave of nausea and fear. I could just reach the hatch now. My fingers found the latch, a cold metal lever. I pushed it, twisted it. It was stiff, rusted, but it moved. With a groan, the hatch creaked open, revealing a square of even deeper darkness above. I pulled myself up, one agonizing inch at a time, my arms screaming in protest, my chest wound protesting every movement. My legs dangled, kicking uselessly for a foothold. It was a desperate, ugly struggle, but I was almost there, almost free. My head popped through the opening. Above me, a narrow shaft of emergency light illuminated the elevator shaft, a dark, gaping chasm stretching up and down into infinity. A ladder, thin and metallic, ran up the side of the shaft, my way out. I clambered onto the roof of the elevator, pulling myself free of the hatch, gasping for breath. The air in the shaft was still, heavy, filled with the faint scent of metal and oil. I looked down, back into the elevator. The body of the mutated host lay crumpled on the floor. I closed the hatch, a final click, sealing away the horror. I was on the roof of the elevator, not quite free, but one step closer. The ladder beckoned, a cold, metallic promise of escape. My eyes scanned the shaft. It was dark, dusty, and high, very high. My fourth-floor apartment felt like a lifetime away. I grabbed the ladder, the cold rungs digging into my sore hands. Each movement sent a jolt of pain through my injured side, but I pushed through it, focusing only on the next rung and the one after that. Upward, always upward. The climb was slow, arduous. My muscles burned, my lungs ached. I could feel the blood seeping through the bandage on my chest, warm and sticky. Every shadow seemed to flicker, to shift, to hide something monstrous. My imagination, fueled by fear and exhaustion, conjured shapes in the darkness. As I ascended, I noticed something else. The elevator car wasn't completely still. It swayed, gently, almost imperceptibly, against its cables. A sickening thought struck me. What if the power came back on while I was climbing? What if the elevator lurched, plunging me into the depths or crushing me against the shaft wall? The open loop of that possibility made my stomach clench. I tried to push the thought away, focusing on the rough texture of the rungs under my fingers, the slow, agonizing ascent. I counted the floors as I passed them, marking my progress. 1, 2, 3. Each floor felt like a triumph. When I reached the fourth floor, I saw it. A gap in the elevator shaft wall. A maintenance access door, slightly ajar. A sliver of light, warm and inviting, spilled out. My apartment floor. A beacon of hope. I reached for the door, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. It was heavy, but it opened with a soft groan, revealing a small, dimly lit utility closet. Freedom, or at least the illusion of it. I squeezed through the opening, dropping silently onto the dusty floor of the closet.
The door swung shut behind me with a gentle click. I was out of the shaft, in the building. My heart still thrummed, but the immediate, crushing pressure of being trapped was gone. I leaned against the back wall of the closet, sucking in ragged breaths, the hammer still clutched in my hand. The closet was cramped, filled with cleaning supplies and spare light bulbs. I pushed the door open slightly, peering out into the hallway. Dim emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows. The air was still, too still. No moaning, no shuffling, just an eerie, profound silence. My apartment door was only a few feet away, at the end of the hall. I crept forward, my bare feet silent on the worn carpet. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every faint creak of the building settling made me jump. My injured side throbbed relentlessly, a constant reminder of the hell I'd just escaped. I reached my door. It was closed. Locked. Good. A small victory. My hand fumbled for my keys. They were still there somehow, clipped to my belt loop. A simple, mundane object, now an object of immense power. The lock clicked open with a soft snick that sounded deafeningly loud in the stillness. I pushed the door open, just a crack, and peered inside. Darkness. Stillness. I slipped in, closing and locking the door behind me. I was home. My apartment was exactly as I had left it this morning. The half-eaten bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. The novel splayed open on the coffee table. The faint scent of lavender from the air freshener. It was a snapshot of a world that no longer existed. A chilling museum of normalcy. I stumbled into the bathroom, flipping on the light switch. Nothing. Power was still out. I cursed under my breath. My phone, still gone. I remembered the small emergency kit I kept under the sink. Flashlight, batteries, first aid. I got down on my knees, fumbling in the dark. My fingers closed around the familiar shape of a plastic box. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, a comforting circle of light. I clicked it on, sweeping it around the small bathroom. My reflection in the mirror startled me. My face was pale, streaked with blood and grime. Dark circles under my eyes, a deep scratch across my cheek. I looked like a ghost. I opened the first aid kit, antiseptic wipes, gauze, medical tape. I cleaned the wound on my side, hissing as the antiseptic stung. The rebar had gouged a deep furrow, but it didn't seem to be bleeding too heavily anymore. I covered it with gauze, taping it securely. My arm, where the bus driver had grabbed me, was bruised but not broken. The scrapes on my face were superficial. I was lucky. Horrifyingly, disgustingly lucky. I moved into the kitchen, the flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. I needed water, food. My throat was raw, my stomach a hollow cavern of hunger. The fridge was warm. Power had been out for hours. I grabbed a bottle of water from the back of the pantry, the cool liquor a blessing against my parched throat. I drank deeply, letting it soothe the fire in my chest. Food, canned goods. My prepper instincts, learned from too many late-night documentaries, were finally paying off. I opened a can of peaches, the sweet syrup a stark contrast to the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each mouthful. Survival, just for this moment. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. My ears strained, listening for any sound from outside. The moaning, the distant explosions. They seemed to have faded, or perhaps I was simply too exhausted to hear them. The world outside, the world of mutated hosts and unstoppable extinction, felt distant, muffled by the thick walls of my building. I moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain just a crack. Below, the street was dark, desolate. Abandoned cars stood frozen in place. A light flickered in a distant building, then went out. Silence. An unsettling, profound silence. It was worse than the noise. The silence meant they were out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting. Or moving in mass. Where had they gone? The thought sent a fresh shiver down my spine. The sudden quiet, the absence of the moaning, it felt unnatural, like the calm before a bigger storm. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Were they drawn by sound, by light, By something else entirely? The sheer unknown of this mutation, of these hosts, was a terrifying mystery. I needed to secure the apartment. Barricades. My door was sturdy, but I needed more. The couch, the dresser. I dragged them, grunting with effort, until they were wedged against the front door, adding another layer of defense. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small illusion of control in a world gone completely insane. I sank onto the floor, leaning against the barricaded door, the flashlight beam resting on my lap. Exhaustion, bone-deep and overwhelming, finally caught up to me. My eyes burned, my muscles screamed. But sleep felt like a dangerous luxury. What if I missed something? What if they came? My mind drifted back to the park. The family, dead but unbitten. What had killed them?
The virus? Something in the air? If the mutation wasn't just spread by bite, if it was airborne, if it was already everywhere, then there truly was no escape. Extinction wasn't just happening, it was already here. Unstoppable. I closed my eyes, but the images flashed behind my eyelids. The bus driver's empty gaze, the woman in the tattered dress, the growling in the elevator. The faces of the mutated hosts forever etched into my memory. This was my new reality. A world where survival was a moment-to-moment struggle. A world where humanity was on the brink of an unstoppable extinction. I had to keep going, had to find answers, had to survive. But as the darkness pressed in, a profound loneliness settled over me, chilling me more than any monster. Was I truly alone in this? Were there others? And what did it even matter if the fight was already lost? The quiet hum of my refrigerator, a sound of mundane comfort, was a stark reminder of everything that was gone. It was just a broken machine now. And so, perhaps, was the world. The quiet in my apartment was a suffocating blanket. Every nerve was stretched taut, listening for a sound that might signal renewed danger. The flashlight beam, a fragile shield against the encroaching shadows, cast dancing giants on the walls. I kept it low, pointing it mostly at the floor, wary of attracting any unwanted attention from outside. I checked my phone again, a futile gesture. Still dead. No signal. Just a black mirror reflecting my gaunt, terrified face. The world had gone silent, not just outside, but electronically. No news, no desperate calls, no last goodbyes. Just radio silence, a profound vacuum of information that screamed the end. My mind kept replaying the scene in the park. The family, untouched, but lifeless. It gnawed at me. If it wasn't just bites, what was it? An airborne pathogen? Some kind of instant mutation triggered by an external factor? The phrase, when the hosts mutated, kept circling in my head. It wasn't just how they mutated, but why, and what caused the unbitten to fall. I needed to find out. I needed answers. But first, I needed to get more secure, more mobile. My first aid kit was limited. My food supply, though better than nothing, was finite. I was still vulnerable. I spent the next few hours moving silently through my apartment, gathering anything I thought might be useful. A sturdy backpack, extra water bottles, a sharp kitchen knife honed to a razor's edge, matches, a lighter, my thickest coat, my hiking boots, practical items, tools for survival. Each item I packed was a small act of defiance against the overwhelming tide of unstoppable extinction. The sun began to rise, a faint gray light filtering through the window, painting the world in shades of despair. It was morning. My first full morning in the apocalypse. I hadn't slept, couldn't. The constant throb in my side, the phantom moans, the lingering scent of decay, they wouldn't let me rest. I peered through the curtain again. The street below was still deserted, eerily calm. But a new sight caught my eye.
Down the block, a car, or what was left of it, was smoldering, sending a thin column of black smoke into the pale sky. The distant explosions had stopped, for now. The silence was punctuated by a faint, rhythmic thumping. It took me a moment to place it. A helicopter. Not the frantic, panicked buzzing of news choppers, but a heavy, deliberate thud. 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 Military. My heart leapt with a jolt of desperate hope. Maybe it wasn't over. Maybe they were fighting back. Maybe Extinction wasn't truly unstoppable. I pressed myself against the window, trying to catch a glimpse. The sound grew louder, passing directly overhead. I saw it. A heavy transport helicopter, dark against the pale sky, flying low, heading east. It wasn't landing. It wasn't dropping off troops. It was leaving, retreating. The hope I'd felt curdled into a bitter despair. If the military was pulling out, then what hope was left? The helicopter faded into the distance, its rhythmic thumping slowly dying away, leaving behind the suffocating silence. That was it then. We were on our own. No cavalry, no rescue, just us against them. I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment. It was a prison, a comfortable death trap. I needed to move, to search for other survivors, to find a way out of the city, to gather more supplies. But where to go? My mind went to the hospital, Riverside Memorial, my old stomping grounds. If there were still any doctors, any supplies, any answers, that would be the place. But it would also be a death trap. Hospitals were always the first to be overrun. Bodies, sick people, limited exits, a recipe for disaster. But the potential rewards. The internal debate raged. Risk versus reward, logic versus desperate hope. What would a sane person do? Stay put and eventually starve, or venture out into the hellscape for a slim chance at survival? I didn't know if I was sane anymore. I decided. The hospital. It was too risky not to try. The craving for answers, for understanding, was a powerful drive. If the hosts mutated in such a way, if Extinction truly was unstoppable, I wanted to at least know why. I checked my gear one last time, backpack heavy on my shoulders, kitchen knife secured to my belt, hammer still in my hand. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but a strange resolve had settled over me. Fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was mingled with a fierce determination. I wasn't just running anymore. I was fighting. I cautiously unbarred my apartment door, peeling back the layers of furniture until the way was clear. The hallway was still silent, still dim. The air was heavy, stagnant. I crept out, flashlight beam cutting a path through the gloom. The stairwell. It was the only way down. I moved silently, descending one flight at a time, my ears straining for any sound. The building creaked and groaned around me, each noise amplifying in the silence. My hand tightened on the hammer. As I reached the second floor, I heard it, a faint scraping sound coming from the apartment directly across from the stairwell. Apartment 2B. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet old woman, always baking cookies. My stomach clenched. Had she been one of the unbitten, or had she been changed? I paused, pressing myself against the wall, listening. The scraping sound was rhythmic, persistent, like something dragging, or someone. My breath hitched. I needed to investigate. Or did I? Every instinct screamed to keep going, to ignore it, to escape. But what if it was her, still alive? A sliver of light from under her door, a faint yellow glow like a candle. My curiosity, a dangerous thing in this new world, overruled my caution. I crept closer, my heart pounding. I put my ear to the door. No sounds of moaning, no growling, just that persistent scraping. "Mrs. Henderson?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then a low whimper. A human sound. Hope surged, blinding me to the danger. "Mrs. Henderson, are you in there?" I tried again, a little louder. "It's Alex, your neighbor." The door creaked open, just a crack. Through the narrow gap, I saw an eye. Wide, dilated, terrified. Not the vacant, milky gaze of a mutated host, but human. "Alex?" A voice, frail and trembling. "Oh, thank God, you're alive." My relief was overwhelming, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. A survivor, another human being. A crack in the suffocating wall of loneliness. "Yes, Mrs. Henderson, I'm here. Are you okay?" "No," she whispered, and her voice was thick with tears. "No, I'm not. I'm hurt, and I can't move." The open loop, the new dilemma. A survivor, trapped and injured. Do I help her, risking myself and exposing myself to more danger? Or do I press on, pursuing my own survival, burdened by the knowledge of leaving her behind? This was the kind of impossible choice this new world threw at you. What would you do? The door to Mrs. Henderson's apartment opened wider, revealing a chaotic scene. Furniture overturned, lamps shattered, a fine layer of dust coating everything. And Mrs. Henderson herself, slumped against the far wall, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. A bone protruded from her shin, a gruesome sight.
Her face was pale, clammy with sweat, but her eyes, though wide with fear, were lucid. "Oh, Alex," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was alone. I thought they got everyone." "Who got everyone, Mrs. Henderson?" I asked, moving cautiously into the apartment, my flashlight beam sweeping the room. No other bodies, no sign of struggle beyond the disarray, just the elderly woman, broken and bleeding. The things," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They came in. I heard the screams. My husband, he went to see what was happening. He didn't come back. Then they were here, trying to get in. I barricaded the door, but one of them, it broke through the window. I tried to run. I fell. I think I broke my leg." My gaze snapped to the shattered window. Below, the street was dark, but I could make out shadows moving in the distance. The thumping of the helicopter was long gone. My plan to leave was now complicated, very complicated. "It's okay, Mrs. Henderson," I said, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "You're safe now. I'll help you." I knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Weak, thready. Her skin was cold. She was in shock. The bone protruding from her leg was compound fracture, a nasty injury, not something I could fix with my limited supplies. "We need to get you somewhere safe," I told her, my mind racing, "and we need to get that leg splinted." "My medicine," she whimpered, pointing a shaky finger at a small table laden with pill bottles. "I need my heart medicine and water." I retrieved the pills and a bottle of water, helping her take them. Her hands trembled as she swallowed. She was old, frail. This world was not designed for people like her. It was a grinder, designed to chew up the weak, the sick, the unprepared. Another chilling example of how this unstoppable extinction was indiscriminately sweeping through humanity. "Where's your husband, Mrs. Henderson?" I asked softly, knowing the answer but needing to confirm. She looked away, her gaze fixed on the shattered window. "I heard them tearing at him in the hallway. I didn't open the door. I couldn't." Her voice broke and she sobbed, deep, gut-wrenching sobs. The raw pain of her confession cut me to the core. What would you have done? Close the door? Listen to your loved one die? It was an impossible, horrifying choice. "It's okay," I said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You did what you had to do to survive." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Did she? Did I? I started looking for materials to splint her leg. My eyes fell on a broom handle leaning against the wall, perfect, and some old towels from the linen closet. As I worked, carefully positioning the broom handle and wrapping it tightly with the towels, she began to talk.
her voice a thin thread of sound. It was so fast, Alex. 1 minute, everything was normal. The next, chaos. People changing, biting. It was like a nightmare. My husband called it the rage virus from a movie. But this was worse. It was like their bodies mutated, changing them into something else entirely, something hungry. When the hosts mutated, I murmured, the phrase escaping my lips before I could stop it. Yes, she whispered, her eyes wide. Mutated. They lost everything. Their souls, their minds, just empty vessels of hunger. The splint was crude, but it would hold for now. Getting her out was the real problem. She couldn't walk. I couldn't carry her down 4 flights of stairs and through what was likely a hostile street. My hospital plan was now completely derailed. We need to stay here for a while, I told her, my voice heavy with the reality of our situation. It's not safe outside. The streets are full of them. I know, she said, clutching my arm. But what about food, water? My medicine will run out. And what if they come back? Her eyes flickered to the shattered window, then to the barricaded door. She was right. Her apartment was a temporary safe haven, but a ticking clock. I had some food and water, but not enough for 2, especially if we were holed up indefinitely. And her medicine was a critical factor. I scanned the room again. Her pantry, her fridge. I could gather some supplies. But I also needed to think about the long term. This apartment, even with its barricades, was vulnerable. The building itself was a giant concrete target. I need to go on a supply run, I told her. Around the apartment first, then maybe outside, but only if I have to. She looked at me, fear warring with a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "You'd do that? For me?" "We're all we've got left, Mrs. Henderson," I said, the words feeling profound, heavier than I expected. We have to help each other. The truth was, helping her, having another human to talk to protect, was a strange comfort. It gave me purpose beyond mere self-preservation. It grounded me in the overwhelming chaos. Maybe this was how humanity fought back against an unstoppable extinction. Not with bombs and bullets, but with small acts of kindness, of shared struggle. I started to go through her kitchen, silently thanking the gods of domesticity for elderly women who stockpiled canned goods. Her pantry was a treasure trove. Canned soups, vegetables, fruit, crackers. Enough to last a week, maybe 2. More water bottles, even some granola bars, small miracles. As I rummaged, I heard a new sound, a faint scratching, coming from the ceiling, above us. My blood ran cold. My head snapped up. The building wasn't empty, and that wasn't a mouse. The scratching grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just above us. It seemed to be moving across the ceiling, toward Mrs. Henderson's living room. A low, guttural moan, muffled but unmistakable, followed. They were in the building, on the floor above, and they were moving towards us. The brief respite of safety was shattered. "What was that?" Mrs. Henderson whispered, her eyes wide with renewed terror. "Stay quiet," I breathed, my hand automatically going to the knife on my belt, then gripping the hammer. The flashlight beam, a useless beacon, trembled in my hand. This wasn't just about escape anymore. This was about survival, second by second. The building, once my sanctuary, was now a trap, and the mutated hosts were closing in. The scratching and moaning from the floor above grew louder, more insistent. They were directly overhead now, a chilling reminder that the walls of the building were not impenetrable. I could hear the faint, dragging sound of their feet, the intermittent thud as one of them stumbled. It sounded like more than one. How many? 2? 5? 10? I didn't know, and the uncertainty was a fresh wave of terror. Mrs. Henderson's breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. Her eyes were fixed on the ceiling, a mirror of my own fear. I tried to project calm, but my hands were shaken. We were trapped on the 4th floor with an injured woman and whatever monstrosities were lurking above. I crept to the living room, my flashlight beam sweeping the ceiling. The sounds were definitely coming from directly above us. It wasn't the kind of building with false ceilings, just plaster and concrete. But if there was a weak point, then I saw it, a faint crack snaking across the ceiling, starting from the corner of the room and extending outwards. It was old, almost invisible, but now, under the assault from above, it was growing. Fine dust began to sift down, catching in the beam of my flashlight. "Oh, God," Mrs. Henderson whimpered. "They're coming through." My mind raced. We couldn't fight them from here, not with her injured and me with limited ammunition and only a knife and hammer. We had to move. But where? The stairwell was our only way down, and I'd heard sounds there earlier. The elevator was dead. We were cornered. "We need to get to another apartment," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "One with a more secure ceiling, maybe one with a stronger door." "But my leg," she cried, a fresh wave of tears in her eyes. "I can't move." "I'll help you," I insisted, forcing down the surge of panic. "We'll go slow, just across the hall, to apartment 4C. It's empty. I know the owner is out of town." It was a gamble, a desperate, terrifying gamble. But staying here was a guaranteed death sentence. The crack in the ceiling was widening, a fine rain of plaster dust now falling steadily onto the carpet. A low, splintering groan came from above. They were actively trying to breach the floor. This wasn't just random wandering. This was focused, relentless. I helped Mrs. Henderson to her feet, supporting her weight. She cried out as she put pressure on her injured leg, her face contorting in pain. "I can't, Alex. I can't do it." "Yes, you can," I said, my voice firm, trying to inject some of my own resolve into her. "We have to, together, one step at a time." We shuffled toward the door, a slow, agonizing crawl. Each movement was a torturous exercise in pain and fear. The scratching above grew more frantic, punctuated by sharper thuds. I could hear wood splintering. They were almost through. I reached her door, carefully unbarring it. The silence in the hallway was still unsettling. I peered out, my flashlight beam sweeping the corridor. Empty, for now. "Ready?" I whispered, my heart pounding. She nodded, her face pale, her jaw clenched in a grimace of pain. I opened the door, and we began our slow, agonizing traverse across the hall. Mrs. Henderson leaned heavily on me, her weight almost too much for my injured side. Each step was a battle. I kept my eyes scanning, my ears straining, waiting for the first sign of movement, the first groan, the first attack. The hallway seemed to stretch for miles. We were halfway across when I heard it. A guttural growl, followed by the familiar shuffling, coming from the end of the hallway, near the stairwell. My blood ran cold. One of them, heading our way. "Faster," I urged Mrs. Henderson, my voice raw with panic. "We need to go faster." She tried, truly she did, but her injured leg buckled, and she cried out, her voice loud in the suffocating silence of the hall. The mutated host at the end of the hall paused. Its head tilted, as if listening. Then it lurched forward, faster now, drawn by the sound of human distress. "No!" I shouted, pulling Mrs. Henderson forward with a desperate surge of strength. We were almost there, just a few more feet, the door to 4C. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped them. The right key, the brass one. I jammed it into the lock, twisting frantically. The lock clicked. "Get in!" I screamed, shoving Mrs. Henderson through the doorway. She stumbled, falling onto the carpet inside. I turned to face the approaching mutated host. It was a man, well-dressed, but his face was a horror. Half-rotted, one eye missing, jaw hanging slack. He was moving with a terrifying speed now, a low growl rumbling in his throat. I brought the hammer up, ready to strike, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. He was too fast, too strong. Then from above, a sound like a thunderclap. The ceiling in Mrs. Henderson's apartment finally gave way. A torrent of plaster, wood, and concrete rained down, followed by a chorus of snarling, hungry moans. The floor above had breached. They were in. The noise, the sudden, overwhelming crash, disoriented the approaching host. It paused, its head snapping toward the sound, its movements momentarily stalling. It was my chance. I slammed the door to 4C shut, twisting the deadbolt, shoving the heaviest couch I could find against it. Mrs. Henderson was huddled in a corner, sobbing uncontrollably. "Are you okay?" I gasped, turning to her. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "They're everywhere, Alex. There's no escaping them. Extinction. It's really happening, isn't it?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. The absolute despair in her voice. The cold, brutal truth of it. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. The apartment was dark, silent, except for her sobs and my own ragged breathing. We were safe, for now, but the clock was still ticking, and the building was slowly, inexorably being overrun. I left Mrs. Henderson huddled in the corner, her sobs a soft, mournful sound in the dim apartment. My heart ached for her pain, for her loss. But I couldn't wallow in it. We were alive, and that meant we had to keep moving, keep fighting. The apartment 4C was a mirror image of mine, but with a different layout of furniture, a different scent. It felt impersonal, sterile, another abandoned life. I moved through it silently, my flashlight beam sweeping the rooms, searching for anything useful. The pantry was sparse. A few cans of tuna, some dried pasta, nothing like Mrs. Henderson's well-stocked shelves. But the bathroom held a find, a full bottle of rubbing alcohol and a roll of duct tape. Valuable. Alcohol for sterilizing, tape for makeshift repairs, even for splints. Small mercies in a world gone to hell. I checked the windows. This apartment faced the inner courtyard, offering a slightly different view. Still dark, still silent, but the smell of burning was more pronounced here. The city was still smoldering. As I surveyed the desolate scene, a thought struck me. The apartment above Mrs. Henderson's, my own apartment. If the ceiling had collapsed in her place, the one above mine might be compromised too. My carefully gathered supplies, my temporary fortress, all could be gone, swallowed by the relentless tide. The thought was a bitter pill. I returned to Mrs. Henderson. She had calmed slightly, her breathing more even. "We need to secure this place," I told her, my voice low. "And then we need a long-term plan. This building isn't going to hold." She nodded weakly. "I know." I heard them coming through the floor above. There were so many. They just kept coming. "They're not just mindless monsters, Mrs. Henderson," I said, a new theory forming in my mind, a terrifying insight. "They're drawn to us, to the living, like predators, and they seem to be able to find weaknesses. That's why the ceiling in your apartment failed, I think. They found the crack. They exploited it." "So they're smart?" she whispered, her eyes wide. "Not smart, not in a human way," I clarified, "but persistent, relentless, like a tide. They follow the path of least resistance. They overwhelm through sheer numbers and persistence. This isn't just a simple infection. This is a mutation that turned them into efficient, single-minded hunters. That's why extinction feels so unstoppable." The realization was chilling. It meant hiding wasn't enough. It meant waiting wasn't enough. It meant they would find us eventually. I spent the next hour reinforcing the apartment door with whatever furniture I could move. The dining table, heavy chairs, a chest of drawers. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant groan of the building sent a fresh wave of fear through me. It was a race against time, a desperate attempt to shore up our defenses before the mutated hosts found us again. When I was finished, I sat down, leaning against the barricade, utterly exhausted. My injured side throbbed. Mrs. Henderson was asleep now, her breathing shallow and ragged. I felt a surge of protectiveness for her. She was a burden, yes, but she was also a connection to the world before, a fragile ember of humanity I felt compelled to protect. The city outside remained silent, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of dawn. No more helicopters, no more explosions, just the profound, unsettling quiet. It felt like the world had simply stopped, waiting for the final act of this unstoppable extinction. My mind drifted to my parents, my sister. Were they alive? Had they escaped? Or had they, like so many others, become one of the mutated hosts? The thought was a bitter, agonizing pain in my chest. I couldn't call them, couldn't know. The uncertainty was a torment. I thought about the choices I'd made, leaving the bus, escaping the elevator, helping Mrs. Henderson. Each choice was a desperate gamble, a thin thread of hope woven into a tapestry of despair. Would any of it matter in the end? Would any of us make it? A new plan began to form in my mind, desperate and dangerous. We couldn't stay in this apartment building. It was a death trap. We needed to get out of the city, to find a vehicle, to find a place away from the densely packed population centers. A farm, a remote cabin. Somewhere the mutated hosts couldn't easily find us, couldn't overwhelm us with their sheer numbers.
But getting out of the building, getting to the street, finding a car, all of it seemed like an insurmountable challenge. The streets would be swarming with them. It was a suicide mission. But what was the alternative? Slow, agonizing death by starvation or by being overwhelmed in this building? I looked at Mrs. Henderson, still sleeping fitfully. I couldn't carry her. I couldn't leave her. We would have to move together, slowly, painfully. A deep, heavy sigh escaped my lips. The quiet was broken by a soft thud, not from above, not from outside, from the apartment next door, 4B. A slight vibration in the floor. My head snapped up. I crept to the shared wall, pressing my ear against it. Nothing. Then a low growl, a wet, tearing sound, and a grunt, not human, distinctly animalistic. They were in 4B, next door. My heart pounded against my ribs. I had thought we were safe in 4C, but the mutated hosts, with their relentless drive, their uncanny ability to find weakness, were already moving through the building. They were closing in. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The building wasn't just compromised, it was being systematically hunted. This wasn't just a matter of waiting out a storm. This was a siege, and we were the last, dwindling embers of resistance against an unstoppable extinction. My eyes swept the apartment, searching frantically for another way out, a fire escape, a balcony, anything. But 4C was on the courtyard side, no fire escape visible, just sheer brick wall. We were trapped. The growling from 4B grew louder, more distinct. The tearing sounds intensified. It sounded like they were actively trying to get through the shared wall, or perhaps they had already found a way in. I backed away from the wall, my mind racing, a cold dread settling in my gut. They were coming. They were always coming. This was the terrifying reality of the mutated hosts, and I had to find a way out, not just for me, but for Mrs. Henderson, for humanity. Even if extinction seemed unstoppable, I had to try. The sun was fully up now, casting a harsh, unforgiving light on a dying world. The growling and tearing sounds from apartment 4B grew more intense, closer. I could feel the vibrations through the shared wall, a chilling tremor that permeated the entire apartment. Mrs. Henderson woke with a start, her eyes wide with terror, her gaze fixed on the wall. "They're here," she whispered, her voice a thin, reedy sound. "They found us." "Not yet," I said, trying to infuse my voice with a confidence I didn't feel. "They're in the next apartment. We have some time." But the truth was, we didn't. The mutated hosts were persistent, relentless. They wouldn't stop until they got to us. This was the terrifying efficiency of their mutation. And I had to find a way out, not just for me, but for Mrs. Henderson,
For humanity. Even if extinction seemed unstoppable, I had to try. The sun was fully up now, casting a harsh, unforgiving light on a dying world. The growling and tearing sounds from apartment 4B grew more intense, closer. I could feel the vibrations through the shared wall, a chilling tremor that permeated the entire apartment. Mrs. Henderson woke with a start, her eyes wide with terror, her gaze fixed on the wall. "They're here," she whispered, her voice a thin, reedy sound. "They found us." "Not yet," I said, trying to infuse my voice with a confidence I didn't feel. "They're in the next apartment. We have some time." But the truth was, we didn't. The mutated hosts were persistent, relentless. They wouldn't stop until they got to us. This was the terrifying efficiency of their mutation.
My eyes darted around the apartment. We were on the 4th floor. No fire escape. No easy way down. The door was barricaded, but for how long? The thought of being trapped, slowly, inexorably, overwhelmed by a horde of these things was a fresh wave of panic. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. The words were a bitter taste in my mouth. Then I saw it, the window, directly across from where Mrs. Henderson lay. It opened onto the inner courtyard, a sheer drop of 4 stories. But below, on the ground floor, there was a small, cluttered area, a maintenance shed. And leading to it, a series of outdoor air conditioning units, stacked one above the other like enormous, greasy steps. It was a dangerous idea, a suicidal idea, but it was the only idea. "The window," I said, pointing. "We can go down that way." Mrs. Henderson followed my gaze, her eyes widening even further. "Down there? Alex, that's 4 stories, and my leg." "I know," I said, cutting her off. "It's not ideal, but it's our only chance. The wall between us and 4B isn't going to hold forever, and the stairwell is probably compromised. We go down the outside, using the AC units as a ladder, and then we're out of the building, and we find a car." It was a desperate plan, born of desperation, but the alternative was simply to wait for death. "Can you make it?" I asked her, looking directly into her eyes. She hesitated, then a flicker of fierce determination crossed her face. I have to live, for my husband." Her words, simple and brave, were a fresh surge of resolve for me. We wouldn't give up, not now. I went to the window, carefully unlatching it. It was old, stiff, but it opened with a protesting creak. The cool morning air, carrying the faint scent of smoke and decay, rushed in. I leaned out, peering down. The AC units were still there, still stacked. Not a perfect ladder, but climbable. Risky, extremely risky. The growling from 4B intensified. A dull thud, then another. They were definitely trying to get through the wall. I could hear splintering wood, crumbling plaster. They were almost through. "No time," I said, turning back to Mrs. Henderson. "We have to go now." I went to the pantry, grabbing a few more cans of food, a couple more water bottles, stuffing them into my backpack. Every ounce of weight was a liability, but every calorie was a necessity. I also grabbed a bedsheet, tearing it into strips. Not strong enough to hold our weight, but maybe to help tie us together, to provide a grip. I came back to the window. "I'll go first," I told her. "I'll make sure it's stable. Then I'll help you down." She nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Be careful, Alex." I slung my backpack on, secured the knife to my belt, and took the hammer in my hand. My injured side protested, a sharp, burning pain, but I ignored it. This was for survival, for both of us. I swung my legs over the windowsill, carefully lowering myself onto the first AC unit. It was old, rusted, but it held. I tested my weight, slowly, deliberately. The metal groaned, but the unit remained firm. I slid down onto the next one, then the next, moving slowly, cautiously, my eyes fixed on the units below. The descent was terrifying. Each unit was covered in grime and dust, and the gaps between them were wider than they looked from the window. I had to stretch, to contort my body, to find precarious footholds.
My hands were raw, scraped by the rough metal. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. From inside the apartment, I heard a new sound, a loud, splintering crash. The wall to 4B had given way. They were in. "Alex!" Mrs. Henderson screamed. "They're here!" Panic surged, cold and immediate. I had to hurry. I was 2 stories down now, halfway there. But Mrs. Henderson was still up there, alone. "Hold on, Mrs. Henderson," I yelled back, my voice raw. "I'm almost down. I'll come back for you." It was a lie. I couldn't come back up. I needed to get down, then figure out how to get her out from the ground. I reached the ground floor AC unit, dropping the last few feet with a jarring thud. My legs buckled, but I stayed upright. I was on the ground, in the courtyard. Now to get Mrs. Henderson. I looked up. The window of 4C was still open, a dark rectangle against the brick. And framed in it, I saw her, Mrs. Henderson. And behind her, looming in the darkness of the apartment, was a grotesque shadow, a mutated host. "No!" I screamed, my voice ripped from my throat. She turned, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The shadow lunged. I saw her arms go up, a futile gesture of defense. Then she was pulled back, out of sight, into the darkness of the apartment. Her scream was cut short, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound. My heart shattered. She was gone, just like that. After all that effort, all that pain, all that hope. She was just another victim of the unstoppable extinction. My failure, my burden. It hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs. I stood there, frozen, staring at the empty window, the silence of the courtyard deafening. Grief, sharp and sudden, clawed at my throat. I had promised to protect her. I had failed. But then, a new sound, a low growl, coming from the open window above, and a shadow, not Mrs. Henderson. Another one of them. Peering down, its head cocked, its milky eyes fixed on me. It had seen me. It knew I was here. Rage, cold and pure, surged through me, replacing the grief. I wouldn't let her death be for nothing. I wouldn't let them win. Not yet. I turned and ran, my feet pounding on the concrete of the courtyard, away from the building, away from the horror. My side ached, my chest burned, but I pushed through it, fueled by a potent cocktail of grief and rage. I burst through a gate, emerging onto a quiet side street, bathed in the sickly yellow light of the early morning sun. The streets were deserted, no cars, no people, just the occasional overturned trash can, a scattered newspaper, a child's forgotten toy. Remnants of a life that was gone. I kept moving, my eyes darting, searching. A car, I needed a car, any car, a way out of this city. I spotted one, a beat-up sedan, parked haphazardly against the curb, its driver's side door slightly ajar. A wave of desperate hope, fragile but persistent, washed over me. A chance to keep going, a chance to survive. A chance to honor Mrs. Henderson's memory. I approached the car cautiously, hammer raised, my senses on high alert. No movement, no sound, just the metallic tang of dried blood in the air. I peered inside. Empty. The keys were still in the ignition, another small miracle. I climbed in, my hands shaking as I put the key in the ignition. It turned. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life, a surprisingly loud sound in the desolate street. The sound of life, the sound of hope. I threw it into drive, slamming my foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, squealing its tires, leaving the apartment building, the courtyard, the horrifying image of Mrs. Henderson's demise behind me. I drove, not knowing where I was going, only knowing I had to get out, out of the city, out of this hell. As the car sped down the deserted streets, I saw more of them, shuffling figures in the distance, some feeding on fallen bodies, others just wandering aimlessly, their empty eyes searching. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. The phrase burned in my mind, a constant reminder of the fight ahead. But I was still alive, and as long as I would keep fighting. I would survive. The highway stretched out before me, endless and desolate under the pale morning sun. The air was clear here, away from the city's smoke, but the silence was still heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional distant moan carried on the wind. I clutched the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my eyes scanning the horizon. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every abandoned farmhouse a potential hiding place or a new horror. The events at the gas station had shattered something within me. The memory of the child thing, of what I had been forced to do, was a raw wound in my soul. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a killer. The transformation was unsettling, profound. This new world, where when the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable, demanded such changes, such sacrifices. My fuel gauge was full now, a small comfort, but I still didn't have a destination. Just a desperate need to keep moving, to find some corner of the world where humanity still clung to existence. Or, failing that, a quiet place to die with dignity. I drove for hours, the monotonous rhythm of the road a strange balm to my frayed nerves. I passed abandoned cars, crashed trucks, occasional glimpses of bodies by the roadside, some still, some twitching, caught in the throes of transformation. Each one a stark reminder of the widespread, indiscriminate nature of this unstoppable extinction. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the empty landscape. Heat began to build in the car. I needed to pull over, rest, eat, and try to make a plan. Up ahead, a small cluster of buildings, a rest stop, maybe a small motel. It looked abandoned, desolate, but it offered potential shelter and maybe, just maybe, some more supplies. Another gamble. But every step in this world was a gamble. I slowed the car, pulling off the highway onto a cracked asphalt lot. The motel was a single-story structure, its windows boarded up or shattered. A vacancy sign, faded and leaning precariously, swung gently in the breeze. The convenience store attached to it looked even worse than the last one, completely gutted. I cut the engine. The sudden silence was jarring, amplifying the distant moans that seemed to carry from everywhere and nowhere. I grabbed my hammer, the knife, and my backpack and stepped out of the car. The air was hot, dusty, and smelled of decay. My eyes scanned the perimeter. No movement, no immediate threats. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It felt wrong, too quiet. I approached the motel entrance cautiously. The door was off its hinges, lying flat on the ground. I peered inside. Darkness. A long, dim corridor stretching into the unknown. Rooms with open doors, revealing stripped beds and scattered belongings. A transient place, now abandoned to the silence. I moved slowly, deliberately, my flashlight beam cutting a path through the gloom. Each step echoed unnaturally loud in the empty corridor. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of apprehension. I checked a few of the rooms. Most were empty, ransacked. Some contained faint traces of struggle, bloodstains on the walls, overturned furniture. A chilling narrative of desperation. In one room, I found a half-eaten bag of chips and a nearly full bottle of water. Small treasures. I added them to my backpack. Every calorie counted. Every drop of water was life. As I moved deeper into the motel, a new sound reached me. Not a moan, not a growl. A faint, repetitive scratching. Coming from behind one of the closed doors, room 108. My blood ran cold. I froze, pressing myself against the wall, listening. The scratching was insistent, rhythmic. It sounded like something trapped or something trying to get out. A sudden, fierce surge of hope, illogical and dangerous, pulsed through me. What if it wasn't one of them? What if it was another survivor, trapped just like I had been? My internal monologue was a battleground. Risk it or leave it? After Mrs. Henderson, the idea of abandoning another human, however faint the hope, was almost unbearable. This was the dilemma of a world on the brink. I crept towards room 108, my hammer raised, my mind a storm of caution and desperate hope. The scratching grew louder, and now I could hear a faint whimper. It sounded human. It sounded like a child. My heart hammered against my ribs. A child. After what happened at the gas station, the thought was both terrifying and irresistible. I couldn't just leave it, could I? I reached the door. It was old, wooden, but appeared intact. The scratching and whimpering were definitely coming from inside. I pressed my ear to the wood. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Is anyone in there?" The scratching stopped abruptly. Silence. Then a small, choked gasp. "Hello?" A child's voice, small, fragile, terrified. My heart leaped. A child. After what happened at the gas station, the thought was both terrifying and irresistible. I couldn't just leave it, could I? I reached the door. It was old, wooden, but appeared intact. The scratching and whimpering were definitely coming from inside. I pressed my ear to the wood. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Is anyone in there?" The scratching stopped abruptly. Silence. Then a small, choked gasp. "Hello?" A child's voice. Small, fragile, terrified. My heart leapt. "Yes, it's Alex. I'm a survivor. Are you okay? Are you alone?" "Yes," the voice whispered. "I'm scared. There's something outside my door." My blood ran cold. Something outside her door? What? I backed away from the door, spinning around, my flashlight beam sweeping the corridor. Empty, just shadows. "What are you talking about?" I whispered back, my voice laced with a fresh wave of apprehension. "I don't see anything." "It's gone now," the child whispered. "It was just standing there, looking at me through the crack under the door. It smelled bad. A mutated host. It had been here, right outside her door, and it had left. Why? Had it heard me, or was it something else?" This was the unpredictable horror of their mutation. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm going to open the door. Stand back from it, okay? Get as far away as you can." "Okay," she whimpered. I fumbled with the doorknob. It was locked, of course. I looked at the hammer. I could smash the lock, but the noise would be deafening. It would attract anything for miles. Another impossible choice. Save the child or remain safe? What would you have done? I made my decision. The child was alone, trapped. I couldn't leave her. I gripped the hammer, took a deep breath, and brought it down on the doorknob with all my might. The wood splintered, the lock burst, and the door swung inward with a crash. My flashlight beam swept the room. It was small, dingy, and huddled in the corner, a small figure, a girl, maybe 6 years old. Her eyes wide, tear-streaked. She was clutching a worn teddy bear. Her face was clean, unbitten, a human, a real living human. "You're safe now," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I had found another one, another spark in the gathering darkness of unstoppable extinction. But was saving her just delaying the inevitable, or was it the only thing that mattered? The little girl, no older than 6, blinked at me from her corner, her small face streaked with tears and dirt. She clutched her teddy bear to her chest, her eyes wide like a frightened deer. You saved me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," I said, my voice gentle. I knelt, trying to appear less threatening, less like the monster I sometimes felt myself becoming. "I'm Alex. What's your name?" "Lily," she mumbled, burying her face into her teddy bear. "My mommy told me to hide here and wait for her. She said she had come back." My heart clenched. Another agonizing moment of truth. Her mother was probably one of them now, or worse. How do you tell a child that? How do you crush that fragile hope? The question hung heavy in the air, a silent comment bait for anyone listening. "What would you say?" "Lily," I began, choosing my words carefully. It's not safe out there right now. A lot of things have changed. Your mommy might have had to go somewhere else to be safe, but we can look for her, together." It was a partial truth, a necessary lie. She looked up at me, her eyes searching my face. "Really? You'll help me find her?" "Yes," I said, a promise I wasn't sure I could keep, but one I had to make. "But first, we need to get out of this place. It's not safe here. We need to go somewhere quieter." I helped her up. She was small, frail. Her clothes were dirty, but otherwise intact. No injuries, no bites. A small miracle in this new world of mutated hosts and unstoppable extinction. "Did you see what was outside your door, Lily?" I asked, my voice low. She nodded, her eyes widening again. "It was like a broken man. He smelled bad, and his face was all wrong. He just stood there, watching. Then he went away." "Did you hear anything else?" "Lots of sounds," she said, her voice shaking. "Screaming, bangs, and that low noise, like when my tummy growls when I'm hungry, but bigger. The moaning, the familiar symphony of the dead." She was a witness, a tiny, fragile survivor, carrying the burden of what she had seen. We moved quietly out of the room, my hand guiding her. The corridor was still empty, the silence still unnerving. But now I had a companion, a reason beyond myself. It was a terrifying responsibility, but also a profound comfort. We reached the car. I helped Lily into the passenger seat, securing her with the seatbelt. She looked small and lost in the spacious interior. I tossed a hammer onto the back seat, then got in, starting the engine. The roar filled the desolate air, a beacon for anything that might listening. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Out of the city," I replied, pulling out of the rest stop. "Into the countryside, to find somewhere safe, and to look for your mom." The highway stretched ahead, bathed in the growing warmth of the morning sun. The air was clear, clean, a stark contrast to the death and decay we were leaving behind. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. A child, a burden, yes, but also a potent symbol of hope, of the future. The fight against this unstoppable extinction wasn't just about my own survival anymore. It was about hers. We drove for miles, the landscape slowly changing. The urban sprawl gave way to open fields, rolling hills, patches of forest. The occasional farmhouse, lonely and isolated, dotted the landscape. No signs of life, no other cars, just the endless, empty road. Lily fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head lolling against the window, her teddy bear clutched tight. Her innocent, peaceful breathing was a stark contrast to the violent reality we were fleeing. I let her sleep. She deserved it. The sun was high now, a harsh, unforgiving disk in the sky. My eyelids felt heavy. Exhaustion, delayed for so long by adrenaline and fear, was finally catching up to me. I needed to find a safe place to stop, to rest, to reassess. A sign for a small town appeared. Harmony Creek, population 5,000. A small, rural community. Maybe it had been spared the initial chaos. Maybe it offered a temporary respite. Or maybe it was just another graveyard. I took the exit, driving down a tree-lined road. The houses here were older, more spread out. Well-maintained lawns, gardens. A glimpse of a life that was. The further I drove, the more normal it looked. Too normal. The town square was empty. A bandstand stood silent. A small general store, a diner, a post office. All deserted. No cars on the street, no people. A ghost town. I pulled up in front of the general store, cutting the engine. The silence here was different. Not the heavy, oppressive silence of the city, but a lighter, more natural quiet. The chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves. For a moment, it felt like the world hadn't ended. I looked at Lily, still sleeping soundly. I couldn't risk leaving her alone in the car. I gently shook her awake. "Lily," I whispered, "we're here. We need to go inside and look for supplies." She blinked awake, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Are we safe now?" "For now," I said, my voice firm. "We need to be very quiet, and we need to stay together." I grabbed the hammer, Lily clutching my free hand tightly, and we stepped out of the car. The street was bathed in sunlight, but the shadows were long, deep. The general store door was unlocked, a small bell tinkling as I pushed it open. The interior was dim, dusty. Rows of shelves filled with canned goods, dry pasta, cleaning supplies. Untouched, unlooted. My heart leaped with a surge of hope. This was a jackpot. We could resupply here, maybe even find a safe place to fortify. "Stay right behind me, Lily," I whispered, my eyes scanning the aisles. No sounds, no movement. Just the gentle hum of an old refrigerator, still running, a testament to a power grid that hadn't yet failed here. Another miracle. I started systematically gathering supplies. Canned goods, dried fruit, medical supplies from a small pharmacy section. Lily followed me, her small hand clutching mine, her eyes wide with curiosity, no longer fear. It was almost peaceful. Too peaceful. As I reached the back of the store near the dairy section, I heard it. A faint clink, like glass, coming from behind a row of shelves. My blood ran cold. My head snapped up. I looked at Lily, my finger pressed to my lips, a silent command for quiet. She nodded, her eyes wide again. I crept forward, pulling Lily close behind me, my hammer raised. The clinking sound came again, closer now. And then, a low murmur, a human voice. Another survivor? Hope and fear warring within me. Could it be? After all this time, after all the mutated hosts, after the desolate roads, another human being? Or was it a trap? In this world of unstoppable extinction, trust was a dangerous luxury. The open loop of this encounter hung heavy in the air. What would I find behind those shelves? Would it be friend or foe? I edged around the end of the aisle, my heart pounding. My hammer was ready. My breath hitched. The scene before me was a surreal tableau. Two figures, both human, not mutated hosts, crouched low, rummaging through a box of canned goods. They hadn't seen me, not yet. One was a man, mid-40s, lean and wiry, with a scraggly beard and intense eyes. He was holding a pistol, his movements quick and alert. The other was a woman, younger, perhaps late 20s, with sharp features and a look of fierce determination. She had a baseball bat, its head wrapped in barbed wire, leaning against the shelf beside her. They were survivors, armed, dangerous, and they had no idea I was there. This was the moment of truth. Do I announce myself, risking their aggression? Or do I try to sneak out, leaving potential allies behind? The dilemma was sharp, immediate. I thought of Lily, clutching my hand, her small life now dependent on my choices.
"Hello?" I said, my voice, though quiet, echoing loud in the stillness of the store. They both froze, snapping their heads up, their weapons instantly trained on me. The man's pistol was aimed squarely at my chest. The woman brought her barbed wire bat up, a formidable weapon. Their faces were grim, wary, reflecting the brutal reality of this new world. "Who are you?" the man demanded, his voice low and gruff. "And what are you doing here?" Lily, hidden behind my leg, let out a small whimper. Their gazes flickered to her, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something in their eyes. Surprise. Maybe even a touch of humanity. "My name's Alex," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, putting the hammer down slightly, a gesture of non-aggression. "And this is Lily. We're survivors, just passing through, looking for supplies." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Lily? A kid? Where are your parents?" I hesitated. "Her mother, we're looking for her. She told Lily to hide. The city was overrun." The man's gaze lingered on Lily, then shifted back to me. "The city? Which city?" "Riverside," I replied. "It's gone, full of them. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable." The phrase felt like a heavy stone on my tongue. The man nodded slowly, his expression grim. "Heard the same about Memphis and Knoxville. Whole goddamn country's probably gone. I'm Marcus, and this is Sarah." He gestured with his pistol, not lowering it. "You alone with the kid?" "Yes," I confirmed. "We lost Mrs. Henderson at my apartment building. They broke through the wall." Sarah's face softened, just a fraction. "Rough. You look like you've been through it." "You too," I said, my gaze falling on a fresh scar on her arm. "What's your plan?" Marcus asked, his eyes still wary. "Just driving around?" "North," I replied, "away from the cities, to find somewhere defensible, a place to regroup, to survive." He grunted. "Good luck with that. They're everywhere. We've been holed up for 3 days. Just came out for food. We were lucky this place wasn't touched." "How long have you been out?" I asked. "Since it started," Sarah interjected, her voice sharp. "We were camping, heard the news on the radio. Then it went silent. Came back to chaos. Barely made it out." "Any idea what's going on?" I asked, my desperate need for information overriding my caution. "The unbitten. I saw people who just died, not bitten." Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look. "We saw it too," Sarah said, her voice grim. "The virus, the initial one, it's airborne, highly contagious, kills you in minutes, then you reanimate. The bite just speeds it up. Or maybe it's a secondary infection, an amplifier. Makes the mutation worse, makes them stronger, faster." The words hit me with a chilling clarity. Airborne.
That explained the family in the park, the speed of the collapse, the sheer, overwhelming scale of the infection. It wasn't just physical contact, it was everywhere. The unstoppable extinction wasn't just a threat, it was a fundamental truth of the new world. "So there's no escape," I whispered, the despair threatening to consume me. "Not from the air, no," Marcus said, lowering his pistol slightly, a gesture that spoke volumes. "But you can outrun the biters, outsmart them, and you can find ways to keep safe from the initial infection. Filtered air, avoid crowds, basic hazmat stuff, if you can find it. But mostly, it's luck." "What about a cure?" I asked, the words sounding hollow and foolish. Sarah scoffed. "A cure? Honey, the world ended. The military's gone. There's no cure, just survival, one day at a time." "We're heading west," Marcus said. "Know a place, old bunker. If it's still good, we might be able to make it a base." "West?" I looked at Lily, then back at them. My plan was north, but west, with experienced survivors, with a potential safe haven, it was tempting, dangerously tempting. "We need to stick together," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Numbers are protection, especially with a kid. What do you say, Alex? You and Lily come with us. We share supplies, we watch each other's backs. In this world, alone is dead." The choice was clear, yet terrifying. Trust strangers? Trust my life and Lily's life to 2 people who had just had guns pointed at me? But they were right. Alone was dead. And a group, however small, however wary, was better than no group at all. This was the raw, brutal calculus of the apocalypse. What would you do? Trust them or go it alone? I looked at Lily, who was peering out from behind my leg, her innocent eyes looking between the 3 of us, sensing the tension, but oblivious to the stakes. She was my responsibility, my hope, and my vulnerability. "Okay," I said, extending my hand towards Marcus, then Sarah. "We're in. We stick together." Marcus nodded, a flicker of something that might have been relief in his eyes. He lowered his pistol completely. Sarah gave me a tight, assessing look, then a small nod. The group was formed. A fragile alliance in a world where extinction was becoming unstoppable. The road ahead was still unknown, still filled with danger, but now I wouldn't face it alone. The silence that followed my agreement was thick, punctuated only by the distant chirping of birds and the faint hum of the still-working refrigerator. Lily, sensing the shift in tension, finally stepped out from behind my leg, looking at Marcus and Sarah with wide, curious eyes. "Hi," she whispered, a small, shy sound. Sarah's hardened expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Hey there, kiddo."
"What's your name?"
"Lily,"
she repeated, still clutching her teddy bear.
"Well, Lily,"
Sarah said, a faint smile touching her lips. "I'm Sarah, and this grumpy old bear is Marcus." Marcus grunted, but a hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. The ice was broken, just a crack. A fragile bond of shared survival was beginning to form. "Okay, team," I said, pushing down the surge of relief. "First order of business, secure this place. Then we gather everything we can. Food, water, medical supplies, anything useful. We need to be prepared for the road." "Sounds like a plan," Marcus said, holstering his pistol. "I'll take the perimeter, check the back, the windows, make sure we're not being watched." "I'll help Alex with the supplies," Sarah added, picking up her barbed wire bat. "And keep an eye on Lily." Lily, seemingly content with the new arrangement, gave a small nod and stayed close to Sarah as we began to systematically clear the general store. The initial tension slowly dissipated, replaced by a focused, almost clinical efficiency. We were a unit now, each with a role, each contributing to the collective survival. The store, being largely untouched, was a gold mine. We found canned goods of every variety, bags of rice and beans, jars of peanut butter, crackers, and shelf-stable milk. In the small pharmacy section, we found more bandages, antiseptic, pain relievers, and even a few antibiotics. All essential for battling the physical ravages of this brutal world, where, when the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. Marcus returned a short while later, his face grim. "Found a few of 'em down the road, wandering. Nothing close, but they're out there. And there's a few dead bodies in the motel rooms. Not biters, just dead. Airborne, like you said, Sarah." Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "They just drop, no warning. Then they reanimate, or don't if they're too damaged. The mutation is adaptive." "Adaptive?" I asked, a chill running down my spine. "Yeah," Sarah said, her voice low. "I saw one once, in a city we passed. It was different, faster, stronger, almost like it learned, evolved." The thought was terrifying. Not just mindless hordes, but evolving threats. The true horror of the mutated hosts. This was not a static enemy. This was a dynamic, growing threat. It made the fight for survival even more daunting. It reinforced the idea that extinction truly was unstoppable if these things could adapt. We spent the rest of the morning stocking the car. My sedan, already packed, groaned under the new weight. We found a few more gas cans in the back of the store and filled those too. Fuel was life. As the sun reached its zenith, casting harsh shadows across the desolate town square, we paused for a quick meal. Canned tuna, crackers, and water. A feast in this new reality. Lily, despite her earlier trauma, ate with surprising gusto, her innocent hunger a stark contrast to the grim reality around us. "So, this bunker," I said to Marcus, breaking the silence, "what do we know about it?" He sighed, tracing a line on the faded map. "Old Cold War relic," he explained, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "My uncle worked on it. Off-grid, self-sustaining, hidden deep in the mountains. If it's still secure, it could be a real safe haven.
But it's a long drive, days, maybe more. Mountains, I mused. That means rough terrain, fewer roads. Might be good, fewer of them. That's the hope, Sarah said, her voice laced with caution. But mountains can be dangerous in their own way. Wild animals, extreme weather, and if the bunker is compromised... She left the thought hanging in the air. Another open loop, another terrifying unknown. As we finished eating, Lily suddenly pointed. "Look!" she exclaimed, her voice shrill. "Up there!" We all snapped our heads up. Above us, in the clear blue sky, a faint contrail. A plane, small, fast, and not civilian. Military. Our eyes followed it, tracing its path across the sky. It was flying north, away from us, away from the west. Its presence was a stark reminder of the larger conflict, the desperate, failing fight for humanity. "What do you think?" I asked Marcus, my voice low. "Running or regrouping?" He shook his head, his expression grim. "Hard to say. But if they're still flying, there's still a fight. Somewhere." The plane disappeared over the horizon, leaving behind only the fading contrail, a faint line of hope in a world plunged into darkness. For a moment, we all just sat there, looking at the sky, contemplating the unseen battle, the widespread, unstoppable extinction. "All right," Marcus finally said, breaking the spell. "Time to go. We need to put some miles between us and this place before it gets dark. The hosts mutated, and they get more active at night." We packed up the last of our supplies, securing everything in the car. Lily climbed into the back seat, her teddy bear clutched tight. I took the driver's seat, Marcus next to me, Sarah in the back with Lily. Our small convoy was ready. As I started the engine, Marcus leaned forward, his voice low. "Alex, one more thing. You said the hosts mutated. What else did you notice? Anything specific? Any patterns?" I thought back to the bus driver, the woman in the tattered dress, the growling in the elevator, the child thing in the gas station. They're fast, strong, and they seem to follow sound, movement. But sometimes they just watch, like they're observing. And the ones that are bitten seem more aggressive, more mutated.
Their bodies are broken, but their hunger is absolute. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "Good to know. Every bit of information helps. We'll need it, because out there, it's not just about surviving the day. It's about surviving the night and the next." He looked at me, a grim resolve in his eyes. "We're not just running, Alex. We're fighting. Fighting for every single minute we can get." I gripped the steering wheel, my gaze fixed on the road ahead. He was right. We were fighting. Against an enemy that mutated, that adapted, that spread with a terrifying, unstoppable force. But we were still here, still breathing, still driving, and that had to count for something. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long, menacing shadows across the empty fields. The night was coming, and with it, new horrors. But also, perhaps, a fragile glimmer of hope. The journey west, towards Marcus's bunker, towards an uncertain future, had truly begun. The road ahead was a ribbon of gray, stretching into the darkening horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in streaks of fire and blood, a fitting backdrop for a world consumed by death. I kept the sedan moving, pushing it, trying to put as much distance between us and any potential threats as possible before nightfall. Lily in the back seat had fallen asleep again, her small head nestled against Sarah's shoulder. Sarah watched the road, her expression alert, her barbed wire bat resting across her lap. Marcus, beside me, had taken out a map, poring over it with a grim intensity. "We need to find a place to stop before it gets completely dark," he said, his finger tracing a line on the faded map. "Forest is too risky. Open field leaves us exposed. We need shelter, something defensible." My eyes scanned the desolate landscape, abandoned farmhouses, derelict barns, skeletal trees. All seemed to whisper stories of what had happened, of the swift, brutal nature of this unstoppable extinction. Up ahead, a cluster of dilapidated buildings appeared on the left,
An old, overgrown motel, even more run down than the last, with a small attached gas station. It looked completely deserted. The windows were either smashed or boarded. No lights, just dark, gaping holes where doors used to be. That, I said, pointing, could be something, or nothing, but it's cover. Marcus squinted. Looks like a death trap, but better than sleeping in the car out in the open. They'll hear the engine, eventually. I pulled off the highway, the tires crunching on broken asphalt. The air here was heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The motel sign, barely legible, read, "Whispering Pines Inn." A cruel name, given the circumstances. I cut the engine.
The silence that followed was profound, pressing in on us from all sides. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm against the stillness. "All right," Marcus said, breaking the silence, his voice low. "Perimeter check. Alex, you're with me. Sarah, stay with Lily. Stay in the car. Keep the engine ready. If anything happens, you go. Don't wait." "No," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We stick together. Lily stays in the car. I go with you. I can cover you." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but you keep an eye on that kid. She's priority one." We grabbed our weapons. Hammer for me, pistol for Marcus, bat for Sarah. Lily, now awake, watched us with wide, terrified eyes. "Stay here, Lily," I told her, my voice gentle. "Lock the doors. Don't open for anyone. We'll be right back." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Be careful, Alex." "Always," I said, a hollow promise in this world. We moved cautiously, a small, wary unit towards the motel entrance. The wind, picking up now, rustled through the dying trees, creating a symphony of whispers that sounded eerily like moaning. My skin crawled. The lobby was a wreck. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, debris scattered everywhere. A thick layer of dust covered everything, illuminated by the last vestiges of daylight filtering through the broken windows. The air was cold, damp, and it smelled, that sickeningly sweet smell of decay. "Clear," Marcus whispered, his pistol sweeping the room. We moved into the main corridor, a long, dark tunnel lined with open doors. Each room was a gaping maw, inviting us into the unknown. We systematically checked each one, Marcus leading, his movements quick and efficient. Most were empty, ransacked, a few with the lingering stench of death, but no bodies. "Someone's been through here," Sarah whispered. "Maybe other survivors, or—" She left the thought unfinished. Mutated hosts. As we reached the far end of the corridor, a new sound reached us, a low, rhythmic rasping. Not a moan, not a growl, but something else, something wet, coming from the room at the very end of the hall, room 112. We froze, pressing ourselves against the wall, listening. The rasping grew louder, and then a low, wet cough, followed by a choked gurgle. "That's not one of them," Marcus whispered, his eyes narrowed. "That's human." Hope, illogical and dangerous, surged through me again. Another survivor? Here? After all this time? My blood pounded with a mix of fear and desperate anticipation. Marcus crept towards the door, his pistol raised. I followed, hammer ready. Sarah brought up the rear, her barbed wire bat a silent, menacing promise. We reached room 112. The door was ajar, a sliver of darkness visible within. Marcus kicked it open. The room was dim, illuminated only by a faint light from a cracked window. And there, huddled in the corner, was a figure. A man, late 20s, early 30s. His clothes were torn, caked with grime and dried blood. His face was pale, clammy, and his left arm, it was a mangled mess, wrapped in a blood-soaked rag. A deep, jagged bite mark was visible on his forearm. He looked up at us, his eyes wide, glazed with fever and fear. His breathing was ragged, shallow. He was clearly in pain. And he was infected.
Don't, Marcus said, his pistol raised, pointed directly at the man's head. Don't move. The man tried to speak, but it came out as a wet, rattling cough. His eyes flickered, his gaze unfocused. His jaw worked slowly, spasmodically. The telltale signs. The mutation was already beginning. No, Sarah whispered, her face pale. He's turning. My heart sank. So close to finding another human, another survivor. After all this time? Only to find him already lost. The devastating reality of this world. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable, and there was nothing we could do. Please, the man croaked, his voice weak. Help me. It hurts. I'm so cold. His eyes found mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of humanity, recognition, understanding, despair. He knew what was happening to him. He knew what he was becoming. Marcus raised his pistol. I'm sorry, kid. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, hardened by the grim necessities of this new world. No, I cried out, stepping forward, my hand instinctively reaching out. Wait! Marcus looked at me, his eyes grim. Alex, you know what has to happen. We can't risk it, not with Lily in the car. But he's still human, I argued, desperation clawing at my throat. He's conscious. We can't just... We have to, Sarah interjected, her voice firm, but her eyes held a profound sadness. He's already gone. It's a matter of minutes. And if we let him turn, he's a danger to all of us. The man in the corner began to twitch, a small tremor running through his body. His jaw clenched. His eyes, though still pleading, were slowly beginning to glaze over. The gray discoloration I knew so well was creeping up his neck. Please, he whispered again, his voice barely audible. Don't let me become one of them. His plea, raw and desperate, cut me to the core. This was the ultimate moral dilemma. To grant mercy, to end his suffering, and prevent him from becoming a monster, or to cling to the fragile hope that there might be a way back, a moment of reprieve. But I knew there wasn't. Not for him, not for anyone who had suffered the bite. The mutation was too fast, too complete. Marcus's pistol was steady. His finger tightened on the trigger. Wait, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Let me. Marcus looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but he lowered his pistol. He understood. This was a burden I needed to bear, a choice I needed to make. I took a deep breath, my hammer feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. I approached the man, who was now writhing on the floor, his muscles spasming, his eyes rolling back in his head. The transformation was accelerating. I'm sorry, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. I'm so sorry. I raised the hammer. One clean strike. Mercy. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. The sound was sickening. The man convulsed once, then went still. His eyes, though gray and dead, held a final, fleeting expression of peace. I stood there, breathing heavily, the hammer dripping. My hands were shaking. My stomach churned. Sarah put a hand on my shoulder, a silent gesture of comfort. Marcus simply nodded, his face grim. We need to go, he said, his voice low. Now.
That noise, it might have attracted them. He was right. The silence, which had been so absolute, now seemed to press in, pregnant with unseen threats. The motel was no longer a safe haven. It was a potential death trap. We moved quickly, silently out of the room, leaving the body behind. My soul felt heavy, burdened by the choices I had been forced to make, the horrors I had witnessed, the lives I had taken. This was the new reality, a world where mercy was a quick death and survival was a constant, brutal fight against an unstoppable extinction. We reached the car, my hands still trembling as I opened the door for Lily. She looked at my face, sensing the change, the fresh grief, but she said nothing, just climbed in, her eyes wide. I got behind the wheel, Marcus beside me, Sarah in the back. As I started the engine, Marcus looked at me, his gaze steady. "You did what you had to do, Alex. Don't think about it." But I knew I would, forever. The memory of that man's eyes, of his final plea, would haunt me. This was the price of living in a world where when the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. The sun was dipping below the horizon now, casting long, menacing shadows across the desolate landscape. Night was falling, and with it, the world would transform once again into a hunting ground. Our journey west, towards the unknown, continued. The rumble of the truck was a constant, almost hypnotic vibration that filled the cramped cabin. Outside, the world remained a blur of darkness and shadows, pierced only by the powerful headlights. I watched it all, my mind reeling with the implications of Iron Mountain. A NORAD bunker, a real chance, but also a new set of questions. Hours passed, stretching into a monotonous eternity. Lily, exhausted, slept fitfully against Sarah. Sarah herself nodded off occasionally, her head against the window, her hands still resting on her bat. Marcus, however, remained wide awake, his eyes scanning the horizon, ever vigilant. He spoke little, but his presence was a quiet strength. The terrain slowly began to change. The rolling hills gave way to higher, more rugged peaks. The trees became denser, taller. We were definitely heading into the mountains. The air inside the truck grew colder, a slight chill seeping through the reinforced walls. Around dawn, Captain Miller finally pulled the truck off the main road onto an even smaller, almost invisible dirt track that wound its way deep into a dense forest. The ride became rougher, the truck bouncing and swaying over rocks and roots. My stomach churned. "Almost there," Miller announced, his voice tinged with a faint weariness. "This is the approach road. It's heavily fortified. You'll see. Keep your eyes peeled for anything out of place." My senses went on high alert. Fortified. That meant defenses, but also, potentially, a target. What kind of threats did they face out here, deep in the mountains? We drove for another half hour, the track narrowing until it was barely wide enough for the truck. Trees, ancient and gnarled, pressed in on all sides, their branches scraping against the vehicle's armor. It felt like we were driving into the maw of some ancient beast. Then, a sudden jolt. The truck stopped. Miller cut the engine. The abrupt silence was deafening, broken only by the chirping of unseen birds and the rustle of leaves in the pre-dawn breeze. "Out," Miller commanded, his voice sharp. "Everyone out. Weapons ready. This is where we disembark. The rest is on foot." We climbed out of the truck, stretching our stiff limbs. The air was cold, crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. A faint mist hung in the air, swirling around the trees. The world was still shrouded in a deep twilight, the sun not yet fully risen above the mountain peaks. The other soldiers in the truck, a dozen hardened men and women, emerged, their rifles held at the ready. They moved with a silent, professional efficiency that spoke of long hours of training and even longer hours of combat. Miller gave a series of quick, precise commands. The soldiers spread out, taking up defensive positions, their eyes scanning the dense forest. One of them, a young woman with a scarred face, approached us. "Follow me," she said, her voice low, "and stick close. This area isn't entirely clear. We've had some skirmishes." Skirmishes. The word chilled me. Even here, in the supposed safety of the mountains, they were fighting. The mutated hosts were truly everywhere. And this was no longer just about survival. It was about warfare. We began our trek, following the scarred soldier through the dense undergrowth. Lily clung to my hand, her small feet struggling to keep up. Marcus and Sarah walked on either side of us, their weapons ready, their gazes constantly sweeping the surrounding trees. The forest was eerily quiet, too quiet. My ears strained, listening for any sound of movement, any hint of the familiar moaning. The tension was palpable, a heavy cloak draped over us all. Every snapping twig,
Every rustle of leaves made me jump. After about 20 minutes of arduous trekking, the trees suddenly opened up. We emerged into a small clearing, and there before us was a sight that took my breath away. A massive blast door, made of thick, reinforced steel, was set into the side of the mountain. It was camouflaged, almost invisible against the rock face, covered in moss and vines. Only the faint gleam of metal, visible through the natural camouflage, betrayed its presence. Above it, a small, heavily armed guard tower manned by 2 soldiers with heavy machine guns. This was it, Iron Mountain, the bunker, a true fortress, a beacon of hope in a world consumed by an unstoppable extinction. "Welcome," Captain Miller said, his voice echoing in the clearing as he approached the blast door, "to Iron Mountain." He spoke into a small comms device, and a moment later, a grinding metallic groan echoed through the clearing. The massive blast door, several stories high, slowly began to retract, revealing a gaping maw of darkness within. A powerful filtered air system hissed, drawing in the crisp mountain air. As the door opened, a flood of light, warm and inviting, spilled out. And with it, a new sound, the muffled hum of machinery, the faint murmur of human voices, the smell of fresh coffee. My heart swelled with a profound mix of relief and awe. This was real, a place where humanity still thrived, a sanctuary. We stepped inside, leaving the cold, desolate world behind. The air was warm, clean, sterile. The interior was a network of brightly lit tunnels, made of concrete and steel, stretching into the distance. Soldiers and civilians moved about, their faces etched with weariness, but also with a sense of purpose. Lily, seeing the light, the people, the bustling activity, finally let go of my hand and stared around, her eyes wide with wonder. A small, tentative smile touched her lips. She was safe, truly safe. For now. Captain Miller led us through the bustling corridors, past medical bays, barracks, supply depots. It was a self-contained city deep within the earth, a monument to human resilience, to the refusal to succumb to unstoppable extinction. We reached a small communal area, tables, chairs, a makeshift kitchen. People were talking, eating, living. A sense of normalcy, however fragile, permeated the air. "All right," Miller said, turning to us. "Welcome to your new home. For now, you'll be debriefed, medically cleared, and assigned quarters. You're safe here. We're all safe here." He looked at me, a flicker of something in his eyes. "You've seen a lot, Alex. You've survived a lot. We need people like you here. People who can think. People who can fight." My gaze fell on Lily, who was now cautiously approaching a group of other children, her smile growing wider. She was playing, for the first time in days, maybe weeks, a true, pure moment of joy. But as I looked at the hardened faces of the soldiers, at the scarred walls, at the blast door that sealed us off from the outside world, a chilling thought gnawed at me. This was a fortress, yes, a sanctuary, but it was also a cage. And outside, the world was still overrun. The mutated hosts were still out there, evolving, adapting. When the hosts mutated, extinction became unstoppable. The phrase, for the first time, didn't feel like a death sentence, but a challenge. We were safe here, for now, but for how long? And what would it take to truly stop this extinction? Was it even possible? Or was this just a temporary reprieve, a final desperate stand against an inevitable tide? The questions hung in the sterile air of the bunker, a fresh set of open loops in a story that had no foreseeable end. The fight was far from over, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the true battle for humanity, for survival, was only just beginning. The promise of Iron Mountain was comforting, but the silence of the blast door, separating us from the horrors above, was a constant, haunting reminder of the vast, terrifying unknown that lay beyond its steel walls. The fight was far from over.
and humanity's final stand against an unstoppable extinction was just beginning.